It's my pleasure to introduce to you a hiking pioneer, Teddi Boston. She is the first woman to hike the Pacific Coast Trail from Canada to Mexico on her own. She was born and raised, I read up on you today, Teddi, born and raised on a 500-acre potato farm in Maine, of all places, so as far from Southern California as you could get in the United States, in Maine, where she developed a love for the outdoors from her parents. She and her husband moved to Anaheim in the 1950s, so Anaheim before Disneyland, right? That's when there was still orange groves in Anaheim, right? And she settled into a school district job and the raising of 4 children. A Girl Scout backpacking outing in the 1960s with her daughters rekindled her love for the outdoors. And on the John Muir Trail, she met a Pacific Crest Coast Trail so-called through hiker, someone who had hiked all the way through. She came home and bought the book, I understand, and started planning her own through hike. Oh, but I should let her tell you about it. Today, she's 91 years young and still hiking and volunteering, and please help me welcome Teddi Boston.
Wow, I'm glad to see all you people here. You know, this is a great difference between a 2-man tent for 6 months and this open place. But before I start the program, I have to do a little bit on the San Gorgonio Wilderness Association. It includes 193 active members, and this year they donated over 20,000 hours, which the Forest Service values at about $500,000. That's what we saved the Forest Service. And in that area, we do a lot of things that the Forest Service doesn't have to pay for. We do trail patrols, we do talks to the people, and our motto is, what is our motto? There, you got it. So we try to keep people interested in our wilderness, and we think we're doing a pretty good job. In some of their stats this year, they removed over 120 trees that had fallen on the trails that people couldn't get over or around. We have our own trail crew. That's something else the Forest Service doesn't have to pay for. They work for zero. That's what their paychecks are, big fat zeros. The one statistic I love, they cleared 38,000 feet of trail this year. Sounds better than 7 miles. So they're very, very active. We run different programs. We are full charge of the Brighton Flats Visitor Center. We work at the front desk at Mill Creek. We patrol all the trails. If you're in the wilderness and you meet a ranger, chances are 99.9% that it's going to be a volunteer in a Forest Service uniform with a great big volunteer patch over on their arm. But we do take their place in the wilderness, and I think they appreciate us. But anyway, I would like all the volunteers that are here to please stand so you can be recognized. Come on, volunteers, up! See, the seats went so fast, the volunteers were slow on the uptake because they were busy. But anyway, let's go for a hike. This is what a 65-pound pack looks like. When you put it on, I used to be 6'3" until I put on that 65-pound pack and headed south for 2,600 miles. But my snowshoes are on the back. That's an ice axe in my right hand. And that pack has full winter gear. Some of it I really didn't need. Like I had an expedition down jacket that went nearly to my knees. I only wore it 3 times in Washington, so I sent it home and got a smaller down. I started at Manning Park in Canada, which is 8 miles north of the border, but it's where the road dips down closest to the U.S. And as I say, you're 8 miles north of the border, and this is what I was facing. 10 feet of snow on May 1st in the Northern Cascades. That's what it looked like. The thing that I had to watch most for is if I was in a valley and there was a cliff above me, I had to make sure that there wasn't a big cornice sticking out over. You know, some of them are 3 or 4 feet out from the mountain. They're going to come down in the spring. And so one morning, I actually looked up and I saw this big cornice and backed off. I had to make camp at 11 o'clock in the morning. That night, the thing froze, and so that I could go by it real early in the morning. But this is the Northern Cascades. When I come to a ridge like this, I have a tendency to kind of wander uphill. Don't know why I do that, but I do. I'd been out 3 weeks. 10 feet below me was the Pacific Crest Trail. I kicked off those snowshoes, I threw down that back, and I strutted up and down, and I hooped and I hollered, and I knew nobody could hear me, but that was great. The wild animals must have all disappeared. But, so I thought I was the greatest navigator since Lewis and Clark. And don't forget, they had a woman guiding them. After I put my snowshoes back on, and there was the first trail marker, and I'm right on. Wow. The first time I left the trail to come down for a food box was in northern Washington, and I had left a food box at a motel. And I checked into this motel, and I got to hear ice in a glass of water. It was like music. And to sit at a table and eat. But then, of course, it was back to the mountains. But this is the river that was flowing alongside of the road that I had to walk to come out of the mountains. And it was where the Indians fished for coho salmon. And there I found the Indian cave. So, of course, I had to spend the night in the Indian cave. And here's my fire in the Indian cave. In Washington State, I ran into 2 different blizzards, and you don't go walking around in a whiteout when you're in the mountains. You don't know. You might walk off a cliff. So set up your tent and make yourself comfortable, because you're going to be there for a while. I was in my tent at that time for 3 days. You don't have a shovel because the snow starts building up on your tent, but you got to get out and get that snow off. I used my cook kit, and it made quite a good shovel. And so in the middle of the night, when you felt the snow pressing in on your tent, you struggle into your clothes and go out and get rid of the snow on your tent. This is my favorite slide in this whole series. That's a Canadian J on my fingers. First, I was sitting down reading. I read murder mysteries out there. I read Helter Skelter, and I survived them all. But this bird, I was sitting against a tree reading at the end of the day, and he landed on my foot, and then he came up on my bent knee, and then to the edge of my book, and I said, "Hey, you want a piece of bread? Stick around." So I went over to my pack, pulled out some bread, set the camera on the pack, not knowing what I had in the viewfinder, and I stuck my hand out, and I said, "Okay, buddy, you've got 10 seconds." And there he is. That's a Canadian jay, and they do it all the way across the United States. I pulled into a rest stop in Maine and had some dry peanuts, held it out. A jay came along and took them. The Columbia River separates Washington and Oregon, and you walk across the Bridge of the Gods. I had a food box on the Washington side, and got up to the bridge and set my foot on it. Wait a minute, lady. We charge for walking across this bridge. They charge the car 50 cents. They charge me $0.25 to walk it. They don't do that anymore. The walkers go free. Scottish broom was all ablaze on the Oregon side of the Columbia River. But it's back to the trails. I'm climbing up towards Mount Hood. And the waterfalls on this trail are magnificent. Let me show you a few. There's something funny here. You see one guy going in, you see two coming out. What goes on behind these waterfalls? I had to walk through there and it was very wet. I wouldn't stay inside. But this is some of those waterfalls. And then you come out up on top and there's Mount Hood. It looks like a giant ice cream cone. And the one accident I did have was in this area. I was on the trail and I turned quick and got a dead tree branch in the eye, tore the cornea. That night I was at the rhododendron campground, couldn't lay down and sleep, had to sit up. There was an old tree laying down, and I leaned against the tree, and that's where I slept. Next morning I get up and packed up. I'd never hitchhiked in my life. I did that day. I had a big bandana around, and I went out and I stuck up that thumb, and the first thing that came along was a pickup. And the guy said to me, "Lady, are you in trouble?" And I said, "Yes, I've hurt my eye." And he said, "Let me take you up to government camp. There's the doctor there." So we get up there, and he said, "Let me go find him." He came back, and he said, "He's gone fishing." So he said, "I have an eye specialist in Bend." And I said, "That's a long way south from here." "Don't worry, sweetie, I'll bring you back where you belong." So I went to the specialist in Bend, and he said, and the guy told him what I was doing, that I was going from Canada to Mexico. And he said, "Lady, you have got to stay off the trail for at least a week. If you get an infection in that eye and you're in the backcountry, you will be in trouble. Stay off the trail." Okay. Very reluctantly. So I did get down to Odell Lake, and I had a food box there. It took me 3 or 4 days to get to Odell Lake from where I was. And the coho fishing salmon had just opened for the season. And there was all these trailers and motorhomes. And I saw the resort manager and told him what I had to do. And he said, "Okay, camp near the dock because the mosquitoes are going to come out this week. And at least you can spend the day on the dock." And he said, "Incidentally, there's no charge for you. I charge these motorhomes. I make it off them, not off you." Thank you. So then it was back into the snow. And I was glad to get into the snow. At least the mosquitoes don't follow you in snowbanks. This is your friendly photographer just beyond where you saw the sign. And there was a stream off to the right here. And so I said, "Well, I guess I'll fill up my water bottle, pure cold water." I was laying down and reaching down with my water bottle. The whole bank collapsed. I went into the stream. I got a very cold bath that day. And then I had to wait a little bit downstream to find the log so that I could climb out. Both boots were full of water. So I sat down and took off my boots and got some dry socks out, got up and started walking again. This is coming up towards Crater Lake, and this is Diamond Lake, and it was so pretty I had to take a picture of it. The very next day, I'm at Crater Lake, and Crater Lake is gorgeous. They plowed the road the day before I got there, and it was like you're walking down a big white tunnel. But then you come up over this bank, and here's Crater Lake in front of you, and this near one here is Wizard Island, so it is a volcano within a volcano. And that's how blue the lake is. Of course, they have a way to get down there, and this is my very first wild critter I saw. So, of course, he had to have a piece of bread out of my pack. From Crater Lake, you head towards Ashland, Oregon, which is on the California-Oregon border. And this building was for a fire lookout, and they closed it, but they had a sign on it: "You may use, do not abuse." So, of course, I had to go up and see what it was like. I was headed for Sayad Valley, and daughter Dory was going to meet me there. She was driving up from Anaheim on July 4th weekend. So I got down in the valley, and that was kind of uninteresting. So I went back up to where that fire tower is, and I met a young man from Indiana. First day on the trail, he was going to do Washington and Oregon and Washington, I should say. And so I hiked with him that day up to Green Pass, and then I told him I had to go circle around and go back down to Sayad. And 3 days later, he fell and took out his knee. He went back to Indiana, went to forestry school, came back out to California, and got a job with the Forest Service 10 miles from where we met. And he was there for 32 years. He retired last year. But he took this picture. A sunset looking towards the Pacific. And this is how the trail crew in Northern California get to their jobs on the trail. They ride motorcycles. Wouldn't happen in the San Bernardino National Forest. But I like their little equipment. This has a 24-inch blade, so they're making the trail 24 inches wide. I wanted to get on that thing and drive it, but they wouldn't let me. In California, the year I did this, there was over 800 miles of trail not completed. So you were on country roads, you were on animal trails, you were on Jeep trails, and sometimes it was just plain cross country. But this country roads reminds me of John Denver and what he says about country roads. When you leave Sayad Valley and you're headed south, you come to the Marble Mountain Wilderness. And to me, this is the most gorgeous wilderness I've ever been in. This is Lupin, and it was over 6 feet tall. It was way up high. And there's the trail. Marble Mountain Wilderness. Gorgeous. Looks like a big country estate. Here's more of the Marble Mountains. Man, I was impressed with that one. A field of shooting stars in the Marble Mountains. Deep purple columbine. I know there's some places around here that have it in the wildernesses, but I haven't seen it here. I found it in the Marble Mountains, and it so impressed me, I just had to have a picture of deep purple columbine. You usually see pink and yellow and some of those colors, orange, but deep purple? A field of daisies. You cross Route 5 at Dunsmuir, and I looked up, and there was Mount Shasta with no snow. I took 3 days off to go climb Mount Shasta. And in Northern California, they were having a drought that year, and most of the streams that I depended on for water were dried up. I had one 35-mile stretch. I ran out of water, just kept going. But I learned a lesson. Keep lifesavers in your pack. It will keep moisture in your mouth. This is Bernie Falls. When I was walking through this area every day on black lava and spindly little pine trees, they don't have any pine trees like San Bernardino National Forest does. They were real spindly, and the coolest day I had was 103, and it varied between there and 107. And you literally cook your feet inside your boots. So then when I got to Bernie Falls, it was 103 up on the top. I sat down with my feet in the water all day at 73 degrees. Let it be 103 up on top. But this water just comes out of every place because it's a porous, it's an old lava flow, and so you just see water coming out every place. And then on to the middle fork of the Feather River. The Feather River is way down there, 3,000 feet down. You cross the middle bridge, you climb 3,000 feet. Takes you all day long to do this. Now I'm up near Donner Pass, and this is the Peter Grubb Ski Hut. There's a ski resort right close to that, and you can see how high the chimneys are. The outhouse, which I didn't get a picture of, was over there, 3 stories high. So in the wintertime, you went in the 2nd story or the 3rd story. And in the wintertime in this hut, you went in that door right there, which was on the 2nd floor. And that upstairs is the bunkhouse. They're all metal beds, and the mattresses are in real small gauge wire. And you go to the cupboard, the wire enclosure, pick out a mattress, put it on your bed, make up your bed, and get ready to spend the night. Now, I was sitting inside writing in my journal. I found that I had to have the discipline that when I set up camp about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'd set up my camp, wash off the perspiration of the day, even if it was a cold bath, or sometimes I'd heat water in my little stove and take kind of but you got to get rid of the perspiration that's on your body so you're warmer. Otherwise, you're laying in salt. But when I was in there writing in my journal, these dogs came through the door, followed by these kids, followed by Grandpa. And Grandpa took the picture and his reflections in that window. But there were so many mice in this place. Everything was in tin containers in the kitchen. And the mice all night long. And you just rap on the floor and they'd run away. And 10 minutes later, all you heard was mice coming back. So I spent most of the night rapping on the floor. I'm entering near Lake Tahoe. I'm actually in Squaw Valley. And that's a thunderstorm coming down on me, and am I going to get wet? And I did. Upper Kennedy Meadows. There's 2 Kennedy Meadows. There's one up north, and there's one down south, and I got to both of them. But this is Kennedy Meadows, and I'm headed towards Yosemite National Park. This is coming up over the pass, and that's the northern end of Yosemite National Park. And the basin down there is called Immigrant Basin because that's where the Donner Party went through when they got up to Donner Pass, and most everybody perished. I was going to take a picture of every ranger I saw on this trip. This one is in Yosemite, and he's kind of blurry. As I went to take his picture, 2 nudes jumped off into that lake, and I jerked my camera. It kind of surprised me. I'm headed towards Tuolumne Meadows here, and it was snowing. They had a big snowstorm in August, and this is coming down towards Tuolumne, and there's Tuolumne Meadows. And if this was blown up, I think there were about 9 hikers on that, just free climbing. But this was right after the snowstorm. And way over there, near that snow, where the little arch is Donahue Pass. So I walked from Tuolumne up to Donahue Pass, and this is looking back, and the dark area is Tuolumne Meadows. And I wasn't through for the day. I had to get down lower, and I got down in, and there was a creek, and I thought, oh, great, good place to camp tonight. Big sign on the tree, big bad bear, please hang food. It is the only night on the entire 2,600 miles that I hung my food. And I was so tired that I was afraid I wouldn't hear the bear. So I did hang it once. Next morning I get up, it's snowing. And I'm right near Thousand Island Lakes. And usually in the summertime, there's a 1,000,001 Boy Scouts. I came through there in August. There wasn't a single Boy Scout. It was snowing. And this is John Muir's 2 favorite mountains, Mount Ritter and Mount Banner. And they're at the foot of Thousand Island Lake. But then it's onward. Devil's Postpile, right outside of Red's Meadow. I pull into Red's Meadow and I explain I'm a PCT hiker, blah, 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 blah. And you have a food box. We don't have a food box. Why? It was sent to you. It's probably in Mammoth. You'll have to go to the post office in Mammoth. Okay. Have you got a cabin I can rent? So I'm renting a cabin. Put all my stuff in it. Slept there that night. Headed for Mammoth the next morning. And these people were in a motorhome. They come by me and they said, lady, where are you going? I said, Mammoth. Get in, we'll take you to Mammoth. That's where we're headed. But on the way, you go past this big earthquake fault, and the earth opened up, and you can walk through. And I thought, if it opened up, couldn't it close up while I'm down here? I did not hesitate in that stroll. Back to the trail. And this is Louise Lake. And as you can see, it's pretty serene. There was a horse packing group in there. And he had about 8 or 10 mules, and he was going in to take food supply to a camp just up the way. This is some of the high country. As you can see, you're well above tree line. No greenery anyplace. More of the high country. I was just below Silver Pass, and the wind was blowing so hard, even the blackbirds were walking. They weren't flying. And I got on the leeward side of a big boulder, and I saw a man and a young boy coming down the path. So I stood on the leeward side of a big boulder and watched them come down. And the guy gets up to me and he says, young lady, where are you headed? And I said, Mexico. Where did you start? And I said, Canada. Do you carry the Pacific Crest Trail guidebook? I said, the Bible? Everybody carries the Bible. And he said, I'm the publisher and the author. It was Thomas Winnett of the Wilderness Press. Thomas died 3 or 4 years ago. But anyway, for once in my life, I said the right thing at the right time. You know, when I was at Red's Meadow, and I went in and got my mail, and because I was supposed to have a Yogi Bear picnic basket at Blaney Meadows, which was 3 days out of Red's Meadow, up the trail or down the trail. And so when I went in and got the food box, I wasn't in exactly good humor because I had to go clear into Mammoth. And so I said, so I was sorting through the food box. I only need 3 days of food because that's where I get my Yogi Bear picnic basket. So I it took 3 days of food and sent the other on to Independence. And when I get back out to Red's Meadow, I pulled out a letter and says, sorry, Teddy, we can't make it to Blaney. I got an 8-day trip and 3 days supply. Well, I do have a fishing kit. And besides that, people feel sorry for me when they see I don't have any food. Ha ha. But when you come to a stream like this, I had a little frying pan the handle folded into. And I would look for the fish I wanted. If they were too big, no, can't take you. So I'd get a smaller one, clean it, take off the head, the tail, and with margarine in my pack and onions along the riverbank. And I'd set that up, and people come by, do you carry onions in your pack? No, they're over there on the riverbank. They thought they were going to get an onion like this instead of a scallion. So, but if you pick enough, they make good food and a fish fry. I'm headed up towards Ray Lakes, and that monument, that mountain right there fascinated me. This is a Muir hut named after John Muir, and you're asked not to use it unless it's an emergency or a storm or something, because you're above tree line, and human waste does not deteriorate if there isn't bacteria around. See that plane up there? I was doing this program in a little school, and this little girl would raise her hand, and if I'd look at her, she'd pull her hand down, and when she saw this airplane, she'd say, a flying saucer? So I've always kept the flying saucer in this program. But it's really a recon plane looking for fire in some of the valleys. Ray Lakes. To me, they're the most gorgeous lakes in the whole Sierra. I think they're fascinating. I walked into here, and there was a picnic table. And wow, I get to sit at a picnic table and have my lunch. And I met the trail crew a little ways down there. Where did you get the picnic table? Oh, our helicopter operator kind of hooked onto it down in Independence. He's going to take it back before school starts. But then, when you leave Ray Lakes, you go up to Glen Pass, and this is looking back down. And I stood there for a moment, just listening. The only thing I heard was my own heartbeat going thump, 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 and my own breath. That was all the noise there was at the top of Glen Pass. This is the high country. The only way you can see it is by either riding a horse, like Val would do, or Shanksmere, you walk in. But this is the high country. Pothole Lake, it has no entrance and no exit. It's melting snow and rainwater and never gets scummy. And if you can get down to the side of it, it's fresh water. That first white building out in the desert is Independence. This is Onion Valley, and I started down the road. That's where that food box is. And a woman in a pickup came up, and she said, "Lady, where are you going?" And I said, I got to get down to Independence for a food box. Are you the one that's walking from Canada to Mexico? Yeah, I'll admit it. Yeah, that's me. And she said, let me drive you down there. I'll drive you back. I got a million questions for you, and we probably won't get them all answered by the time we get back up the hill. I'll drive slow when we come back. This is the mighty Kern River. The mighty Kern. The Forest Service built the bridge, but you can't walk across it with your pack on. You have to drag your pack on the rails. And I'm coming into Kennedy Meadows on the south, and it's east of Lake Isabella. I get in there and I find a campsite, and I walk over to the store, and I said, I don't see any trail signs. Where is the trail south? And she said, there's no trail south. This is either the beginning or the end of the Pacific Crest Trail. And I said, my God, they moved Mexico while I was gone. That's the very last peak in the Sierras. That's Olancha Peak. And so now you're down to good old Southern California. When you leave Lake Isabella, you go up Jawbone Canyon. And when I was coming out of Jawbone Canyon, big fleecy clouds, and I felt the raindrop, and I said, think snow, it doesn't rain in the Mojave. And I had sent on everything that I possibly could to Acton, which was going to be my next stop. And I woke up, I even set the rainfly, because I didn't need the rainfly in the Mojave. Woke up at 11 o'clock. My feet are wet inside my tent, inside my bag. It's raining. By 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm sitting up because I'm soaked. Waited for daylight and took a reading on a little town of Mojave. Pouring rain. I was in the middle of Tropical Storm Kathleen that had come up from Mexico and stalled over the Mojave. The Mojave was filling up like a lake. So I took a bearing on the Mojave, and when I got there, motel right there. And I said, I don't care if you just got a broom closet. And he said, where in the heck are you coming from? So I told him, and he said, where are you going? So I told him. He said, lady, I'll find you a room, and that's not going to cost you a red penny. Thank you. And right across from the motel was a laundromat. So I waded over, because the streets were about halfway up to your knees. And if it was just wet, it went in the dryer. If it was dirty, it went in the washer. And so then I struggled back across, and when I came through the front door with all this now dry stuff, except my sleeping bag, that was over a closet door up in the room. And the guy said, you know, to be fair to you, I think I should furnish you with your meals for the time you're here. And I said, you gotta take her. After I left the Mojave and it cleared up, it was cold out on the desert. And this is coming into the National Forest. As you can see, it was a monument for the workers. But, Perspiration Point lost all its tools. And this is your friendly photographer. Once again, the camera on the pack. When I got up into Angeles, all the trails were gone. Highway, whatever that highway is that leads to Wrightwood, was closed because there were so many landslides on it. I couldn't walk the trails because there wasn't one, so I got up on the highway and was walking towards Wrightwood. And you ever walk down an empty highway? And it just goes clunk, 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 clunk. And I come around one corner, and here's a big crew, and half the road is gone down into a valley. And the guy saw me coming and he hollered out, "Don't send down any more rocks, I got a lady down here." So I got across that area and got down into Wrightwood, where I had some friends that were going to put me up for 2 or 3 days. And this is after I left that area. This looking down towards Los Angeles and the smog. I actually got lost more in the San Bernardino National Forest than I did in any other place on the whole trail, and I had worked there for 3 years. That tells you of my navigational skills in the San Bernardino National Forest. But this is down, you went down Mission Creek, and there was supposed to be a sign down at the bottom guiding you over to Whitewater. But some character had decided to take it for a souvenir. So I'm headed down Mission Creek, and I'm headed too far east. I need to be over towards Mount San Jacinto. So I'm walking across the desert, and desert walking is not easy. All the topsoil is gone, and you're walking on rocks. But you did have these little hillocks, and I climbed one of them, and way out to the south, I could see a building. If there's a building, there's a road. So I headed for it and came down off this thing, and I see all these motorhomes and trailers. One thing wrong. These people don't have on clothes. I'm in the middle of a nudist colony. So this guy in a pickup truck came roaring up to me. "Lady, how in the H did you get in here?" "I don't know, but how the H do I get out of here?" So he says, "You follow this right around to the..." So I'm walking. I know I'm beat red. I'm embarrassed. Here I am with this big pack, and nobody's got clothes on. So I'm walking up there and just looking at the road. I can see these shoes, and I couldn't wait to get out that gate. And it was a big wrought iron, used brick affair, and it said, "Desert Gardens." And I said, "Garden of Eden." But anyway, I cut across towards San Jac. This is not quite there yet. And that night, because I could hear the thunder lightning up in San Jac, and the stream below this bridge was beginning to run, I slept under the highway bridge that night, out of the rain. And you know, there's so many layers of tar on those bridges, you don't even hear the traffic. It's very quiet, and there was kind of a shelf up there, and I set up my tent in case there was any creepy crawlers around. That tent was like a security blanket. But this is in Idlewild. My 4 kids came up to see me, daughter Dory. The 2 girls, Denise and Doreen, were walking to the border with me. It should have taken 6 or 7 days. It took 12. The girls were 20 and 21, and they weren't in real good shape. And she's embarrassed. But anyway, it was good seeing the kids. And now I'm down towards the end of the trail at Campo, and you have to go, back then you had to go under Highway 8, and this is how you got under it. And I had a walking stick, and I was dragging it along the side, and these 2 said to me, "Why are you dragging that stick and making all these noise?" "I'll tell you when we come out." That's what it was like in there. It was hot outside. I was afraid there might be rattlesnakes in there. And they don't like vibration. So I was making it vibrate. This is down at the border. When I got near the border in Campo, I called home, and they said, "Where are you?" And I said, 2 miles from the border. "Please don't walk out there. We want to come down and join you and walk the last 2 miles with you." So this is the kids from my neighborhood. There were 26 or 27 of them. I think they came to see the girls, because the girls had been gone for a while. The girls brought these outfits, the white shorts, and the shirts said Mexico or bust. And we're at the Mexican border, and that little white house used to be a custom house for the Mexicans coming into the... And now this whole area is 12-foot black wall, iron. And these are the reporters that met me. There was one from San Diego. There was the Orange County Register was there. And it's the end of the trail. No more whispering pine trees. No more owls. No more coyotes in their welcome call. It's the end of the trail. And it's kind of hard to accept the fact that you're done walking. And you know, that's the end of my story, and I'm sticking to it. Now it's time for questions. Chris, come on up here.
Well, we're going to break. Why don't you take this one, and I think they'll bring another one so you take that one, Jacob, and Amanda, he's going to...
Chris, incidentally, is the author of my book
that microphone to you.
Is pending. We hope we have a publisher that's going to publish those fantastic pictures in color. Some of the publishers want to change them to black and white, and I'm saying, no, that sunset in black and white will be just streaks in the sky. So Chris has been working on my book now for a couple of years. So this is Chris Epting.
Thanks, Teddy. Isn't she something else? So 2 years ago, I was asked to go speak at the nearby Camp de Benneville Pines and do kind of a writer's program. And Teddi was speaking there as she did tonight. And I have to tell you, I've written a lot of books, and I'm a journalist, and I've had an opportunity to meet and interview and be with like the biggest musicians and actors and athletes. But I watched Teddi give her presentation, and I thought she was the most compelling, interesting person I think I'd ever seen. What she leaves out, she was 50 years old when she embarked on this in 1976. A single woman doing this in 1976 at 50, if you think about it, I don't know if you were doing the math in your head through this, but that's pretty remarkable in and of itself. And also, as we started working together, Teddi had, I thought, the most perfect title for the book we're working on. Because the other thing, too, when I saw her speak, she made reference, I think, once tonight of a journal. And I heard that. I spoke to her afterwards, and I said, you kept a journal through this whole trip? Because typically somebody might take this trip and then get home and sort of write about it in the past tense. But Teddi was writing in real time on the trail. You had a writing discipline every night where you would get in the tent, and literally every single night she would document what she had done that day. Which, as a writer, you know, I've written a lot of travel books, but it's always after the fact. To have somebody that was actually reporting in real time what was happening, you're also a very good writer, was spectacular to me. So that, I think, is just, you know, fascinating as well. And the title that I thought you came up with, which was simply, it sort of defines the theme of your trip, was Alone but Not Lonely. Right? And that really was sort of the essence of what your journey was and your adventure. But I don't know about you. I like hiking. I like the great outdoors. But the daunting nature of this trip. You also said another thing I thought was very funny. When asked why you were going from north to south, was that you felt, psychologically, it felt like you were going downhill.
Right.
Like gravity would make it somehow an easier trip going down. So.
But there's number two reason was the fact that I was walking towards home, not away from home. And the third reason was I wanted to take the far north, the unknown, when I was real fresh.
That's amazing. Any other questions for Teddi tonight? You can either say them into a mic or call them down, and I can repeat them.
Yeah, we've got 2 mic runners here, so Jacob and Amanda, so just Jacob take the mic over there, and if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, sir, and
Sure.
asking your question.
My name is Paul Meltzer. I work with the Wildlands Conservancy, and I'm sure you know of us. We've
Yes.
helped to protect Mission Creek and Whitewater. Great, inspiring talk, and I know it's obvious you've inspired so many people, young and old, and men and women alike. I love to hike. I've done a lot of the hiking in the San Gorgonio Wilderness, and I'm often struck by, I go off trail occasionally, that there is a sense of loneliness. And you know, your title is Alone but Not Lonely. But there is this kind of amazing loneliness, aloneness, I guess, from the wilderness. And I could only encourage every human being to get out there and experience that, because it's part of who we all are. But I'm really interested in hearing a little bit about your experience of aloneness or loneliness, because of course you're surrounded by life in the wild, but it's not the collegiality and the communion with other people. So just a moment on that, I'd be really interested.
Well, I just finished my 27th year of volunteering. I did 3 years back in the 70s, and then I did that little stroll, and I was asked if I would come back and be a volunteer again. And so now it's been 24 years with the San Gorgonio Wilderness Association, and I'm still up there, and as long as these legs will carry me, I'm gonna walk. But it is a great experience, and it's getting out into and dealing with nature.
You know, to your question though, too, one thing I noticed with the diary, the journal that Teddi kept, that I think to your point, and we talk about this a lot, is that you know, whenever you work on a book, especially built around one character, you want that character to go through at least one major change, one arc in that book. And you're not, at the end of your journal, you're a very different person than you were at the beginning. And you talk about the fact that before you left, there were certain personality traits you weren't that comfortable with, you weren't happy about, but that the isolation and the desolation allowed you to kind of come to grips and come to terms with certain things that helped you just develop a different perspective, that once you arrived in Mexico, you felt reborn in a sense, right?
Well, see, I don't think I liked myself when I started. Maybe that's why I was doing it alone. But when you're alone with yourself 24/7, you start thinking about the things you don't like about you, and you self-analyze yourself. And those things that you don't like, you face them, and you think, I don't have to be like that. I don't have to be short-tempered. Why can't I just always be pleasant? And you do analyze yourself, and you do make changes, so that I was kind of a different person when I got to Mexico. And I like me.
Well, in that sense, the trip was very therapeutic, because it allowed you to confront things. And again, that isolation, there's nothing like it for really boiling everything down to its most basic components in your life. And, you know, the mysteries of life and everything certainly are more vivid when you're out there alone like that. So
Yeah.
And you were in your about 7 or 8 years ago, you did another hike through the Mexican desert, like 500 miles, right?
It was 342.
Oh, sorry.
And I did
Sorry.
it. I did it 4 years ago. I was 87, and I wanted to see if I still had it.
Primitive camping through the Mexican desert. So, other questions? This is a question about.
Hi, I'm Carla Kellums from the San Bernardino Mountains Land Trust, and Teddi, you are an inspiration to all of us hikers. I'm just curious, with a 65-pound pack, how many miles did you average on the trail?
It all depended on the weather, the conditions. Like, for instance, when I was out of water, it was a 35-mile day. It all depended, and as I headed south, I got rid of more equipment and changed like into summer gear so I could cover more miles. And let's face it, my boots weighed 3.5 pounds apiece. So if you figure out, and it's about 2,600 steps in a mile, multiply that out, and you find that no wonder my legs were good when I got to Mexico. They'd really been exercised.
Didn't there was an REI that kept your original stuff on display, right?
Yeah,
your equipment from that trip.
It's up in Seattle at the factory.
Other questions from anybody?
It took me,
The question is, how long did it take to plan the trip?
it really took me 2 years after I was on the John Muir Trail and I met hikers going north. I had to come home and do some research. I'd never heard of the Pacific Crest Trail, but I found out that everything started in Mexico and went north. They didn't come downhill, they climbed hill all the way. But it took me a good 2 years because I wrote to every national forest along the way, and there's a lot of them on that stretch, and I wrote to the national parks to find out more about the Pacific Crest Trail. And so it took me a long time then to convert it from south to north, from north to south. And then you had to figure out how many miles, how many food boxes you needed, and where they should be. And it took 16 food boxes. And I didn't leave them with my 20 and 21-year-old daughters because, we should have mailed Mom's box a week ago. Now she's really embarrassed.
And we have time for one more question. Okay. The question is, did you have a cell phone or a gun? Before you answer that, for everyone, especially under the age of about 30, this is a pre-internet world in terms of research. Those selfies are taken with a 35mm film camera. This is as old school as it gets. I mean, really, the research alone, I can't speak to. But in terms of supplies like a gun or protection or anything like that, did you carry or have anything at all?
Living across the street from me was a LAPD officer. He took me to the gun range. I was most accurate with a .457 Magnum. That weighs a ton. Besides that, it's illegal to take a handgun into Canada. So I wouldn't have been walking the trails. I'd been looking out through the bars if I had the thing. And it was going to have to be in the bottom of my pack. And I'm going to say, hey, wait a minute, guy, I got a gun. No, wait, I'll get it out. So no, cell phones weren't invented then. I had instructions from my oldest sister to call her in Maine, collect, every time I got to a phone. I called, and her first question is, where do you sleep at night? And I said, what do you mean? I sleep wherever I am. And she said, in the woods? And I said, yes. And I'd be so scared. And I said, of what? She said, I don't know, I'd find something to be scared of.
I think when you ultimately read the book, you'll see that there's the beauty of simplicity, but also the simplicity of danger too. Because again, you're out there alone, and you don't know what's going to happen in the next mile, weather, nature, whatever. And that's to me the real dramatic balance in her story is the unknown. You just didn't know, yet you kept forging on, and you kept learning about yourself. You were going to prove to people that maybe said to you before, you can't do this. And you were going to deliver the message that you absolutely could do this, and you did it. And you didn't just do it, but to see you on the trails today, if you're ever up by Camp Venable Pines, just to meet this woman on the trail, to keep up with her, for one thing, is a challenge in itself. But the sheer joy and spirit and youthfulness of your attitude about this, it makes you just feel younger and better. Just her presence, and you probably felt it tonight, just her being here makes you feel better about the world and nature and hiking and everything else. So thank you very much, Teddi.
When does the book come out?
Wonderful. By the way, our goal, hopefully, is that this book will be released in the next year. We will keep you posted with this and in touch.
Okay.
And thank you so much for hosting my dear friend tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.